Okay, hopefully everything's working now. So this video I have to stop because I got notes and I can't do this while I'm writing. So this is, I want to talk a bit about the Canadian Charter of Rights, which is, don't turn off the video now. I assume that's going to really, you probably came here to see someone ride a motorcycle around and hopefully hurt themselves, but yeah, this won't take too long. And there is a good view. I mean, look down there at this downtown city is Stanley Park. That's quite beautiful, isn't it? There's the bay. And UBC over there to the right. And I don't know, Kits and shit over there. This is the North Shore. But anyway, I wanted to read you a couple of these rights here. Article 50. Citizens are guaranteed freedom of speech, of the press, of assembly, meetings, street processions, and demonstrations. Article 51. Citizens have the right to associate in public organizations that promote their political activity and initiative and satisfaction of their various interests. 54. Citizens are guaranteed inviolability of the person. No one may be arrested except by court decision or by the warrant of a procurator. Citizens are guaranteed the inviolability of the home. No one may, without unlawful grounds, enter a home against the blah, 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 blah. Privacy of citizens or correspondence, privacy of citizens and of their correspondence, telecommunications, etc. I mean, this all sounds very good, right? But this actually isn't the Charter of Rights for Canada. This is the Constitution of the Soviet Union.
Shut the fuck up, Donnie. V.I. Lenin. Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov.
What the fuck is he?
So, I mean, it's hard to imagine that with rights like this, that you can end up in a country with gulags, with people being arrested, tortured, killed, and sent off to a massive prison system for re-education. And all I can think of is that the people that during that time, maybe the people didn't know their rights and maybe the state didn't really care that they had the rights. They just went ahead and did what they were going to do. Almost as though this Constitution meant nothing. And I don't really mean to pick on the Soviet Union per se. I'm sure there are plenty of countries like this where they have very high-sounding rights in their constitution, civil rights for the people, but in practice they don't really amount to a whole lot. So the actual Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms has, and if you had asked me last month what's in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, I would have been guessing. I probably would have guessed some of the things that are in it, but it's not like I'd ever read it before. And I just went through my entire life assuming that we basically had the similar rights to what the Americans have, and I don't need to really consider myself with such things, right? But recently, unfortunately, I've had to look into this a little bit because it appears that our government may be infringing on our rights. No one really knows. There's there's a quite a number of cases, I guess, going on now, but one of the big ones is done by is being lodged by the last living premier who signed the original Charter of Rights in the 80s.
My contention is that the governments of Canada, both federal and provincial, panicked. They panicked. And they went ahead and used fear against the people unnecessarily and brought in measures which they didn't follow the Constitution, There is a freedom of assembly. There is a freedom of association in Section 2 of the Constitution. There is a freedom of conscience, religion, freedom of expression, all in Section 2 of the Constitution. Well, we know from the stuff that's been brought in that assembly and association has been put by the wayside. And then we go to Section 6 of the Constitution, and it talks about mobility, your right to travel anywhere in Canada, your right to leave Canada. And most importantly, for people across the country who are losing their jobs, there's a right to pursue a livelihood anywhere in Canada. That is being violated as we speak. We have friends. We have friends who've lost their job. We have friends who've left the country because they lost their job and they've gone to Mexico. So we're losing people to other countries because of what's happening here. They didn't follow the right procedures. And then Section 7 of the Constitution talks about life, liberty, and the security of the person. Security of the person, which means that you can't touch my body unless I give informed consent. Well, the governments of Canada today are coercing people, threatening people with their jobs if they don't get vaccinated. This is against the Constitution. This is against the security of the person. And finally, in Section 15, the Constitution Act and the Charter of Rights and Freedom talks about equality before the law. We're all equal before the law. Well, we're not all equal before the law now. Here in Parksville, there's only certain places I'm allowed to go. Other people are allowed to go all over. So there is a difference there's a division in our society today, whereas certain people are considered not as good as other people. That's not equality before the law. Yeah. So here are the sections I just outlined briefly to try to give people an understanding of why I'm saying what I'm saying. Now, the big argument is, and some people there are ready, I'm sure, as I was in Nanaimo last night doing a community meeting, explaining all of this, and they were jumping in their seats to ask me a question. And the question was, hey, Brian, hey, Mr. Peckford, hey, former Premier, I know you know a lot about this stuff, but how about Section 1 of the Charter? How about Section 1? Because Section 1 says, these rights and freedoms that I just outlined can be put one side or overridden. And that's true, but there are 4 tests that anybody who's going to override, and that would be a government, any government is going to override these rights and freedoms that they have to meet. 4 tests. One is that you must demonstrably justify what you're doing, not just justify it. You must demonstrably justify it, which means you've really got to go out of your way and show facts and figures in order to demonstrably justify your actions. That's number 1. Number 2, you must do it by law. And a lot of what the government's doing is by regulation right now, under an existing law, not by a new law. Well, this says by law. In other words, a new law. You've got to go back to Parliament, which they haven't done in many cases, okay? So you've got to do it by law. Number 3, it has to be reasonable, within reasonable limits. A lot of this stuff is not within reasonable limits. They don't meet that test. And finally, all of what you do, governments, must be consistent with a free and democratic society. Now you look at those 4 tests and you tell me, I can't find any study done by any government in Canada. I can't find any cost benefit analysis or any report that any government has done, federal or provincial, to meet those tests. There isn't one report to defend their position. So they violated the Constitution because they haven't met Section 1 either. And that's my...
I guess what I would like is a government that is a government that doesn't see the Charter of Rights as an obstacle or something to be ignored or something to be gotten around, but a government that actually wants to uphold these rights, that is worried about introducing any law that might go against these rights. and would work diligently to ensure that if they were to make such a law, that they would tick all the boxes. They would make sure that everything they were doing, they would get legal opinions from the Supreme Court of Canada to ensure that what they were doing, they would be very careful about it. They wouldn't they wouldn't for instance, invoke the Emergencies Act to quell a protest that they didn't agree with, or invoke the Emergencies Act to get rid of the right to be secure against unreasonable search and seizure, which they did, or to invoke the Emergencies Act so that they could arbitrarily detain people, without a court order. So this is, otherwise, I don't know what these things are. Like, what is the point of having a Charter of Rights if nobody pays attention to it, that if it's just like garbage, basically. Something for the, like just an obstacle for the government to get around. One thing I forgot to mention in my earlier diatribe, the thing that I found most objectionable about the invocation of the Emergencies Act, the way they shut down that protest. Now, regardless of how you feel about the protest, whether you feel it was justified, or maybe you felt it was an occupation, maybe you felt it was an insurrection, I don't know. We all have our opinions on what that event in Ottawa was, right? But the way the government resolved the thing was that they, initially the police went to court and they tried to get an injunction saying that protest was illegal. They had a huge shopping list of things that they wanted a court injunction for, and the only thing they got was the cessation of horns. Everything else the judge disagreed with and said basically that it was what they were doing was legal. And so, in order to shut down what was essentially a legal protest, the government enacted the Emergencies Act, and then they were able to unilaterally define the protest as illegal, and then the police could act on it. So this is like a total end run around the legal system in Canada. And I just think that every Canadian should be outraged by that. I hope they are. I truly hope they are. Regardless of how you feel about the protests, regardless of your partisan attachments to, this party A versus party B, this is so fundamental, and such an attack on your fellow Canadians, on their basic rights, that even if you don't like these Canadians, I think we all need to think about that and send a message.
Dude minds, this will not stand. This aggression will not stand, man.
I don't know what else to do. If we allow this to stand, if we allow this as like a precedent for how governments can deal with protests in the future, then Canada is going to be a very, very dark place in the future. So I just hope my fellow Canadians will agree with me on this in the next election. Anyway, that's it. This is really it. I'm really done now. Hopefully I can put this to rest and stop rolling over in my sleep.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.